Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining Groundwork Ohio's webinar this morning. We're thrilled to have you here. Today's webinar's theme is the State of Early Childhood in Ohio, 2024 poll results and implications. We're excited to dig deep with you. I'll just share a brief introduction of Groundwork Ohio for those of you who don't know us. We're a statewide nonprofit, nonpartisan public policy organization and movement building organization that focuses our work primarily on state advocacy. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary this past year, and we champion high quality early learning and healthy development strategies for prenatal to age 5. Our top goal is making sure Ohio is the best place to be a young child, and we advance quality early education systems and health systems in Ohio by engaging, educating, and mobilizing a wide variety of stakeholders, including, I'm sure, many friends on this call, and strategic partners to promote data-driven and evidence-based early childhood policies with our policymakers at the State House and beyond. I'll share just a little bit about housekeeping in the agenda, and then we'll dive right into the heart of today's webinar. We are recording. We'll post this to our YouTube channel. I saw a question in the chat. We'll make sure this is posted, and it will also be shared in our weekly newsletter. Closed captioning is available if you need it. All participants for today are muted, so please do use the Q&A function for questions throughout the webinar. You can see that down below. It's separate from the chat function. It's the Q&A. If we can't get to your request right away during the event, we're happy to follow up afterwards. If you share your email address, our team will do some one-on-one follow-up. And just again, not only will be it recorded and posted, but if you're registered today, you'll get an individual with the recording as well. So now diving into the agenda, we're really excited to have Jarrett Lewis from Public Opinion Strategies. My colleague Troy Hunter, who's our Managing Director of Policy at Groundwork, will introduce him here momentarily. And then after their presentation, I will facilitate a Q&A. We will prioritize for any media who are on the call that we are able to answer their questions first, but we'll do our best to get through as many as we can. So with that, I will pass things over to my colleague Troy Hunter.
Thank you, Brittany. We're excited to be joined by Jarrett Lewis from Public Opinion Strategies. This is our third annual childcare poll, so we're really excited to hear insights from Jarrett. He's been at Public Opinion Strategies since 2008 and started with the 2008 election, so we're excited to have him dive into our results from our 2024 childcare poll. Go ahead, Jarrett.
All right. Well, thank you, Troy. Thank you, Brittany, and thank you to the entire Groundwork team. It's wonderful to be with you all this morning and excited to walk through the results of the poll that we completed just last month. So if you go ahead and go to the next slide. So just quick methodology, and then I'll show you some demographics, and then we'll get right into the findings. We conducted this survey in December 5th through 15th. It was among 800 registered voters across the state of Ohio, and along with, we did an oversample to reach 484 parents with children between the ages of 0 and 5 in Ohio. You see the credibility interval. That's essentially the same thing as the margin of error, which is the terminology we use for an online survey. And I did this poll with my business partner Neil Newhouse, who was unable to be on today, but sends his regards, and we've enjoyed the opportunity to do research with the terrific Groundwork team over the last few years. If you go to the next slide. So you have a sense of the composition and makeup of the survey. I'll just quickly show you here. It is representative of the state of Ohio. It looks very much similar to what we saw just a few months ago in terms of the electoral composition. So this is a survey of voters, and so because there's a lot of policy issues here, this looks very close to the turnout that we saw in November from a race, age, party, gender, education level, and then the media markets. And then if you go to the next slide, just to show you the parent oversample, you're going to see the mentions of parents throughout the slide deck. This refers to the above group. So in terms of region, race, party, and gender, this is the demographic composition of those 484 parents that we spoke with. All right. So just to sort of give a level set, what in terms of those parents that we interviewed, their childcare, their current childcare setup. You see that about 1/3, either themselves or their spouse stay home full time. They do not have childcare. Um, the remaining you see here, 25% have part-time childcare, and that childcare comes through a family member, friend, or neighbor. 20% has full-time childcare from a family, friend, or neighbor. 19% has full-time childcare from a childcare center, and 9% has part-time childcare from a childcare center. So that's the composition of those parents in terms of what their childcare situation is. And then you see by party, ethnicity, and region across the state. So let me walk you through some key findings, and then we'll go right into the data as well. If you go to the next slide, so here are some takeaway points. Ohio parents of young children are facing a childcare crisis. They're already impacted by a negative economy and rising costs, and you'll see that momentarily. These parents tell us things like they report buying fewer groceries than in the past. They're delaying or skipping medical care due to high out-of-pocket expenses, and they're having problems accessing high quality childcare. 1/3 of parents in Ohio with young children say that they've had serious problems paying their mortgage or rent. Nearly half of them say that they've had serious problems paying credit card bills and other debt. Actually, it's at a higher proportion for parents than it is for the broader Ohio population. Clearly, the economic challenges faced by Americans over the last several years have hit parents of young children in Ohio especially hard. Go to the next slide. The issue of reliable and affordable childcare, it's also impacted the economic situation for these parents. They talk about the high cost of childcare, which makes them question whether they can afford to work. Adding to the stress of this is just the challenging task of finding a spot in a quality childcare center. You're going to see nearly 1 in 2 parents in Ohio say it's very difficult to find high quality childcare to access it. While the childcare is a personal issue to these parents, it's very much an economic issue to the state. First, more than 6 in 10 non-full-time working moms say that they would go back to work if their child had access to high quality childcare at a reasonable cost. Further, half of working parents say that over the last couple of months, they've had to cut back on their work hours to care for their children. This has an undeniable impact on the state's economy. Ohio voters, in fact, in this poll, you'll see data that they agree that labor shortages in the state are in part due to a lack of access to high quality childcare. In light of this, Ohio voters very strongly support increasing funding for childcare in order to increase access, affordability, and quality. That support, importantly, extends across party lines. Majorities of Republicans, Independents, and Democrats all agree and support increasing funding for childcare in the state. The linkage between childcare and the state's economy is pretty undeniable. When stay-at-home parents of young children are asked what would having childcare allow them to do, and this is an open-ended question that you'll see later, there's one response that sort of dominates all the others, and that is work more. And when parents of young children with childcare are asked what having that childcare allows them to do, again, one response sort of stands out from the rest in terms of the number of times we heard it. That is the same. It is work. This is a pretty overwhelming and sobering statistic. Among all Ohio working parents, nearly 5 in 10 have had to cut back their work hours in recent months to care for their children. If you put that into real numbers using census data, that means over 1 million working parents in Ohio have cut back their work hours. Clearly an undeniable impact on the state's economy. When asked about policies to handle or deal with the issue of childcare, the polling shows that huge majorities, nearly 9 in 10 voters, support creating a child tax credit to provide tax relief for working families with children under the age of 16. When they hear arguments from either side of the childcare funding issue, Ohioans show overwhelming support, 7 in 10, for increasing funding for the state's early childhood education programs. In other words, when they hear arguments from those who oppose increasing funding and those who support, 7 in 10 opt for the folks who support increasing funding for early childhood education programs. And voters who support increased funds focus on building the next generation of Ohioans who will form the backbone of the state's economy. They also argue that increased access to affordable childcare allows more parents, especially women, to remain employed, providing economic benefits to their families and to businesses across the state. All right, so let's get into that's showing you some data from this survey. Um, when we asked voters, all voters in the state, what are the top issues, or what do they, how important are each of these issues in terms of extremely important, very important, somewhat important, or not that important. Inflation, and this is true across the entire United States. Getting inflation, the cost of living under control is, remains the top issue. Following that, you see reducing the inflow of illegal drugs, controlling the cost of healthcare. If you go to the next slide, when we look at it among voters, or sorry, among parents, what you see, inflation is still the number one issue, but you see childcare and early childhood education programs jump up in terms of importance. So you see making sure that children get a strong start in life through quality early childhood education programs. 52% extremely important among these parents, 86% total important. Helping provide childcare for working parents with young children, 51% extremely important, 85 total. And right below that, lowering the cost of childcare, 49% extremely important to these parents, 84% total important. I mentioned this in the key takeaways or key findings up front, but parents report having greater difficulty in paying their rent or mortgage and credit card bills than the broader population of Ohioans. So on the left side, this question is, have you or anyone living in your household been having serious problems paying the rent or mortgage? You see the number among total, 24% yes. Then you look right to the right of that, you see the number among those parents, 34%. More than 1/3 of parents say that yes, they've been having trouble, serious problems paying their rent, their mortgage. On the right side, the right half of the chart, this question, have you or anyone living in your household been having serious problems paying credit card bills, loans, or other debt? 37% of all Ohioans say yes, 47%, almost 1 in 2 parents of young children in Ohio say yes, they've had the problems. And then we asked this question only of obviously of parents. Have you having issues accessing high quality childcare? We asked this question. The last time we did a poll with the Groundwork team was in early 2023. And you'll see a couple places here where there's some trend data. A lot of the questions we asked this time were new, so they don't have trend. But this question was a carryover that we asked 56% in February 2023. Fast forward just 22 months to this past December, 66%, 2/3 of Ohioans with young children report having issues accessing high quality childcare. Getting into the challenges of childcare. So we like to do open-ended questions where in online surveys, we ask them, a question and allow them to type in the answer. This is one of those. And so we asked, earlier you were asked if you or someone you know is having issues accessing high quality childcare. In your experience, please share a couple of ways that you are personally having issues accessing high quality childcare. You see, the most responses that came back were around the cost, too expensive, affordability, and then you see things like wait lists, staffing shortages, not accepting new children, availability, outrageously priced, cost too high. So these are the things that are the most, the biggest challenges, and it really centers around cost. And over the past few months, have you or those in your household faced serious problems meeting both work and family responsibilities? This question again was we had asked this one in February 2023. You see the increase from 36% who say yes, someone themselves or somebody in their household has faced serious problems meeting both work and family responsibilities, all the way up to 45%, almost half of parents in Ohio say that they've had they face serious problems meeting work and family responsibilities. More than 1/3 say that they've had serious problems affording childcare. So similar kind of question setup. Have you or anyone living in your household been having serious problems affording childcare? That number was 25%, 1/4 back in February 2023, jumps up to 36% last month, more than 1/3 of parents in Ohio of young children having problems affording childcare. This question we asked, have you or those in your household faced challenges with childcare that's caused you or them to miss work, leave early, or lose focus? This is data that's shown among full-time and part-time working parents with children under 5. More than 4 in 10, 44% say that they've faced challenges with childcare that's forced them to miss work, leave early, or lose focus. Fewer than one half of Ohio voters believe that young children in the state are prepared for learning when they enter kindergarten. And Ohioans believe we can do a much better job of preparing young children for learning when they do enter kindergarten. So on the left side, these are two agree disagree statements on the left side. The question was, young children in Ohio are prepared for learning when they enter kindergarten. Please indicate if you agree or disagree with that statement. 47% agree that they are prepared, 43% disagree that children are prepared for learning when they enter kindergarten. On the right side, we can do a better job of preparing young children for learning when they enter kindergarten. More than 8 in 10 voters in the state agree that we can do a better job of preparing young children for learning when they enter kindergarten, including 46% who strongly agree with that statement. Voters don't just agree that sorry. This question was another agree disagree statement. Increasing access to high quality, affordable childcare will help strengthen Ohio's economy and help its workers. 86% and 45% strongly agree that with that statement. I read that in the key takeaways, but I think it's more impactful when you see this visualization. That 86% of voters in the state agree that increasing access to high quality, affordable childcare will strengthen Ohio's economy and help its workers. A majority of Ohioans also agree that labor shortages in Ohio are in part due to a lack of access to quality, affordable childcare. So again, another agree disagree statement with 53% agreeing that labor shortages are due to lack of access to childcare. Again, I read this, or I talked about this in the key takeaways or the key findings at the outset, but you see it here. This question was only asked of non-working and part-time moms. I would go back to work if my child had access to quality childcare at a reasonable cost. 61% agree, 43% strongly agree. That's more than 4 in 10 Ohio moms who are sitting there saying, I'm ready to go back to work. If they're strongly agreeing, that intensity is telling us that they want to go back to work, but the childcare access or affordability is preventing them from doing so. Roughly one half of parents believe that childcare is difficult to find in where they live, and they overwhelmingly believe it is expensive. So the left side, do you generally believe that childcare in your area is difficult to find? 49% say yes. And then we also asked, do you believe that childcare in your local area is relatively inexpensive or expensive? And you see the difference here. More than 7 in 10 say that childcare where they live is expensive. Ohio parents of young children believe that the availability of high quality, affordable childcare has gotten worse over the last few years, and that local childcare centers are experiencing serious staffing shortages. So on the left side, we asked if they felt like the availability of high quality, affordable childcare has gotten better, gotten worse, or stayed the same. And you see 51% said gotten worse compared to 22% who said gotten better, and 26% who said stay the same. And on the right side, from what you know, are childcare centers in your local area having serious staffing shortages? More than 60% believe that yes, childcare centers where they live are having serious staffing shortages. Um, I mentioned this in the key findings up front, but you see the numbers here. Ohio voters across party lines believe the state should increase funding for childcare to increase access, affordability, and quality. More than 80% of voters say that Ohio should increase funding for childcare in order to increase access, affordability, and quality. And you see the numbers here: more than 3/4 of Republicans, more than 80% of independents, and more than 90% of Democrats. So this is very much a bipartisan issue where voters are very much in support of increasing funding for childcare. Um, we did a series in the survey where we asked kind of have any of the following scenarios happened to you? And so you'll see this over the next couple of slides. But to start, more than 40% of parents of young children tell us that they've had to call off or miss a shift at work because of childcare issues. Nearly 1/4, 24%, said that they've had to leave the workforce because of an inability to find affordable childcare. 25% say that their work performance has declined because of childcare issues. Again, this data is only shown among that 484 oversample of parents. 24%, almost a quarter, refused a job opportunity, promotion, or change because it would increase childcare expenses. And when you put all those together, more than 2/3, 68% of Ohio parents with children under 5 have had at least one of those happen that I just read through. 30% of Ohio parents with children under the age of 5 have had 2 or 3 of those happen. In other words, work performance has declined because of childcare issues, refused a job opportunity or promotion because it would increase childcare expenses, had to call off or miss a shift at work because of childcare issues, had to leave the workforce because of an inability to find affordable childcare. It's clear the lack of affordable and accessible childcare has had a very adverse effect on Ohio's economy. Um, when we ask parents what are the biggest challenges in finding suitable childcare, what they tell us is, you see here, it's affordability, it's trusted teachers and staff, and quality are the three ones that rise to the top, with affordability, as you see, 1 in 2 parents saying that's the biggest challenge in finding suitable childcare. Following that, finding trusted teachers and staff, high quality, and then you see some other ones: availability, proximity to home or job, cleanliness, hours of operation. But the ones at the top are really the ones that are driving the biggest challenges for Ohio parents. This is pretty stark. The economic impact here. The left side, this question was: over the last 2 years, how many days of work would you estimate that you have missed because of a lack of childcare? 41% have at least say they've missed at least 5 days of work because of a lack of childcare, which is a pretty stunning number. And then on the right side, over the last couple of months, have you cut back on your work hours to care for your children? 49% of parents of young children in Ohio say that yes, they've cut back on their work hours to care for their children. In real numbers, using census data, that's over 1 million Ohio working parents cutting back hours over the last few months. I mentioned this again in the key findings up front. One of these open-ended questions on the left side, this was asked among um, respondents of young children, parents of young children who do not have childcare, who are stay at home. The question was, if you did have childcare, what would that allow you to do that you don't do now? And again, you see work more, get a job, better paying job. You see some other things, peace of mind, household chores, save money, but it really is around, the most common response that we saw in those open-ended answers was around working more, getting a job. And on the right side, this was asked among those who do have childcare: what does having childcare allow you to do that you would not be able to do otherwise? Again, work more. You see the answers here. Okay, so moving into policies to strengthen childcare. There's been a lot of conversation. There was a lot of conversation during the campaign last fall about the child tax credit. So reflecting the support that's been vocalized by the president, the vice president, Ohio voters, if you go to the next slide, strongly agree. This question, I won't read the whole thing, but basically the setup is, would you support or oppose Ohio creating a child tax credit to provide tax relief to working families with children under the age of 16? More than 80% of voters, 84% of voters in the state support creating a child tax credit. Again, you see the numbers across Republicans, independents, and Democrats. In this day and age, I mean, this is what I do for a living. In this day and age, to see this, more than 3/4 of independents, Republicans, and Democrats agreeing on anything is pretty unprecedented. We don't see it a lot. It's clear how bipartisan this is as an issue, and voters feel strongly about creating a child tax credit. If you go to the next slide, this one it's the same question, although in this question we invoked, at the time when we fielded the survey, it was President-elect Trump and so we said not only has President-elect Trump voiced support for increasing the child tax credit, but President Biden and Vice President Harris also support expanding it. When we invoked that, you see the total numbers were even stronger. 87% support, 42% strongly support. So whether you mention that leaders in Washington on both sides of the aisle support it, whether you don't, you see, more than 3/4 in either case of voters support the child tax credit. All right, getting back into funding childcare. So this, I mentioned this in the key findings, excuse me. When they hear from when respondents heard both sides, both kind of arguments, we had this kind of long setup, and then we said, some people say that the government should help fund childcare for working parents who struggle to afford it, not only to provide a strong foundation of learning for their children, but to allow the parents to contribute to the workforce. And then the other side of it was, other people say that it's parents' responsibility to pay for their own childcare. Parents who cannot afford it should explore alternatives such as family care or leaving the workforce until their children are school aged. What you see here, more than 2/3 of Ohio voters agree with the blue one, agree that government should help fund childcare for working parents who struggle to afford it, compared to 32% who say it's the parents' responsibility. Importantly, majorities of Republicans, independents, and Democrats all sided with the government should help fund childcare for working parents. And then again, we wanted to test, strong, look at strong language from both sides. And this one, there's a little bit more, I think, stronger language on the opposition side. We basically said, some believe that we need to increase state investment in childcare to support the workforce in our economy. Increase access to a quality, affordable childcare will allow parents greater freedom to work and provide for their families. It will also address workforce shortages among employers. The other side, a little bit longer, but basically state government should not be footing the bill for this or raising Ohio's children. Parents should be accountable for raising and educating their own children at this stage in their lives. If they want to have their child in early childhood education, they should be the ones footing the bill, not the Ohio taxpayer. Ohio simply cannot afford another huge government entitlement program that costs hundreds of millions of dollars. Again, you get just they're going to share the slide deck. More than 2/3, almost 70%, agree with the we need to increase state investment. Again, importantly, majorities of Republicans, independents, and Democrats all side with in the 69%, the increased state investment in childcare. Towards the end of the survey, we asked a final open-ended question, and I think I'm coming towards the end here. And so the question was, in your own words, what are the most important reasons why you support or oppose increasing early childhood education funding? Those who supported, there's one of the biggest themes is that quality early education cultivates the next generation of Ohioans who will form the workforce and leadership pipeline. As one voter stated, investing in young children not only benefits their immediate well-being, but also ensures a robust future workforce. There's strong belief that the early years are a critical window for child development with lasting impacts. As one voter commented, children need a stable environment to learn and grow and avoid pitfalls of difficulty later. Many pointed to concerning statistics about kindergarten readiness, with only 40% of Ohio children entering ready to learn. And supporters argue that early funding can help level the playing field for underprivileged children. You can keep going. Another prevalent theme was that increased access to affordable quality childcare allows more parents, particularly mothers, to remain employed, providing economic benefits. As one voter said, lack of affordable childcare is the top reason women leave jobs. Several comments highlighted how early childhood education enables families to have two working parents and achieve stability. So these were just some quotes that we pulled in their own words on this question. You'll see a couple of these that really stand out. The top, there was a voter from Summit County, very short, concise, and impactful. It helps to shape a kid's life. You know, to the left of that, it will help inflation because companies will have workers to get jobs done. Children will get a better quality of training at a daycare, be more sociable, so it makes it easier to learn. The top right, a child has a right to learn. If childcare costs are high, there should be some type of government funding to help families. Right below that, our children deserve the chance at a good future. They deserve the best education possible at no cost to them. Why deprive them of an education because of your financial status? Um, and then bottom right, children benefit developmentally when they have quality care. Our society will benefit when children do well. When parents feel supported, they'll be better able to raise strong children. So happy to take questions or turn it back to Troy and Brittany.
Great. Thank you, Jarrett. We'll do Q&A in about 15 minutes, so there'll be time to float some of our Q&A during that time. But thank you for all the work that Public Opinion Strategies did on this poll and sharing this data with us. We really appreciate all of the insights that you shared today. And now that we've talked about the poll data, we want to talk a little bit about what that means for Ohio and what that means for our policy agenda. If you've been following along with us for the last year, we spent a lot of time in the community trying to understand what the needs of families and children are in the state of Ohio. That led to our policy agenda and our policy priorities. We did 14 roadshows in 13 different communities last year. We worked with our early learning advisory council to talk through issues through a over 7 meeting process where we sat down, talked about concerns, talked about policy priorities, talked about solutions. We surveyed families all across Ohio through our Family Voices project. Our first survey we did in April of 2024 that had 755 parents surveyed. We did a second survey in September of 2024 that had over 2,700 families that responded to that. And all of that input from our advisory councils, from our surveys, from our road shows, all the time spent in the community led us to this destination where we identified what are the policy priorities for families, and we kept landing in the same place. So a lot of the poll data that Jarrett shared today supports, no surprise, a lot of the things we've been hearing for families. The recent poll findings reinforce the pressing challenges that Ohio families face when it comes to accessing high quality, affordable childcare. Families, providers, and our economy are all feeling the strain. However, the data also provides a clear mandate. Voters and parents are ready for change and overwhelmingly support the kinds of solutions outlined in our policy agenda and our key budget priorities. As we talk about expanding access to affordable childcare and increasing eligibility of publicly funded childcare to at least 200% of the federal poverty level, we see nearly half of parents we talked about today with children under 5, 49% report that childcare is difficult to find, and 51% said that availability of quality, affordable childcare has worsened in recent years. Expanding publicly funded childcare eligibility would address those gaps, giving more families access to essential learning opportunities. There's broad bipartisan support, 84% that we talked about earlier for increased child care funding. And it shows that Ohioans understand that this is a priority issue. And it's not just about childcare, it's an economic stability issue. The lack of affordable care forces parents out of the workforce, which weakens our state economy. Increasing access ensures that parents can work and children can learn, and our children can grow up and be the workforce of tomorrow. We know childcare prices are extremely high, with the average childcare price in Ohio for infant center-based care being over $12,000 a year. When we look at Ohio's current publicly funded childcare eligibility, we're at 145% of the federal poverty level, which makes us the worst in the United States for childcare eligibility. A single mother making $44,000 a year with two children, one in infant care and one in preschool, would not initially qualify for publicly funded childcare. So if with the average rate of being $12,000 for infant care and over $9,000 for preschool care, over $20,000, half of that single mother's paycheck would go to, before taxes, would go to childcare alone. So we know that affordability and access is an issue for families, and being able to increase access is going to be able to increase our workforce. It's going to be able to increase our parents' ability to enter back into the workforce. We talked about 61% of mothers said they would return to work or work more hours if they had access to affordable quality care. When we talk about raising publicly funded childcare payment rates to the 75th percentile of the 2024 market rate survey, and adopting enrollment-based payments and maintaining tiered reimbursement rates for quality care, we can see through the data presented today that Ohio providers are struggling. Staff shortages and under-enrollment are a direct result of inadequate funding for misaligned payment systems. By aligning payment practices with the private market, we can stabilize the childcare sector, ensuring that programs remain open, educators are fairly compensated, and families have access to consistent, high-quality care. Early childhood educators play a really important role in shaping young minds, but the average hourly wage is under $14.50 an hour, and makes retention nearly impossible. So we think about parents saying earlier in the poll that Jarrett was talking about, that parents are reporting that their childcare staffing shortages are expanding, that they're getting worse. So not only is childcare expensive and hard to find, when you do find it, we're experiencing workforce shortages all across childcares in Ohio. As we think about limiting co-payments for families to no more than 7% of household income as recommended by federal guidelines, and thinking about that 73% of parents said that childcare is expensive, and many are struggling to cover basic expenses like rent and credit card bills. Reducing or eliminating barriers to that would ease financial burdens and enable more parents to participate in the workforce. When families don't have to choose between paying for childcare and meeting other essential needs, the children benefit from stable care, and parents are empowered to pursue education, training, or full-time employment. These poll findings are clear. Ohioans across political lines understand the importance of investing in childcare, both for families and the economy. By aligning our policy agenda with these insights, we can build together as stakeholders a stronger early childhood system in Ohio. We can support parents, empower providers, and ensure every child has the foundation that they need to succeed. So as we think about these policy priorities that we laid out and opportunities for you to engage and participate, Brittany's going to come on and share after our Q&A different opportunities, but just thinking about how to understand, one, what our policy priorities are and why we landed on these priorities, and how you can share them with policymakers and use the data that we heard straight from Ohio parents and voters all across Ohio to support those asks. So please stay engaged with us. We're going to talk about some opportunities at the end, including our Advocacy Day on March 12th and other opportunities to translate this data to actionable items that we can use. So we're a little bit early on schedule, but I see that there had been lots of questions in the Q&A. So why don't we open up a little bit early and give a chance for people to respond? Thanks, Brittany.
Thanks so much, Troy. And thank you, Jarrett. We appreciate the years of partnership with you and your team putting together these really compelling results. And Troy, thanks for connecting them to our policy agenda for the attendees here today. I would love to start with Laura Hancock, who I believe is here from cleveland.com. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to try to make sure we can answer any live media questions first, and then we'll answer the rest of attendees, but we know folks are on deadlines. And Laura, you should be able to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you for doing this. My
Yeah.
question is, with slide 44, it was by party lines showing if you believe the state should offer tax credits for childcare, and it showed that even like Republicans support this. I was just wondering, did you ask this of the 480 parents, or was this all 800 people? And that was my first question. And then my other question is more of a general policy question. What current tax relief do parents get? My understanding is they do get a couple $100. It's like basically nothing, but there is something. And I was wondering if you could explain what it is. Thank you.
Yep. So I'll just answer the poll question very quickly. That question was asked among the 800, the sample of 800. It was also asked of the parents. I can look it up, but the data shown in that slide with 83% Republicans, 78% Independents, and 94% Democrats all supporting the child tax credit was among the N of 800 sample.
Thanks,
Do you-
Jared.
Do you know what parents currently get? I mean, my understanding is my friends who do pay childcare, they do get something, I think, on their federal tax, some relief. It's only a couple $100. It's basically nothing, but what do they get?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Laura. They receive the child care dependent care tax credit, and it's $600 per dependent child.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your questions. Do we have any other media on the line who wanted to ask any questions before I go to the general audience? And I'll just add an additional note on the dependent care tax credit. That $600 per child is currently up for debate in Congress. So that's a federal concern. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start going through our attendee questions in the chat. In the Q&A, please continue using the Q&A box. Oh, I see Jesse Balmer from Gannett, USA Today Network. Jesse, hopefully you should be able to unmute here momentarily. Our team will sort that out, and you should have that option now.
I think we're good. Thanks so much for this. I had a quick clarification question. When you said that 68% of respondents said the government should help, and you said that included the majority of political parties, do you have the breakdown by political party?
I don't have it at the top of my hand. I can get it and send it to the Groundwork team. So yeah.
Thank you.
We can get that out to you. Jesse, are you on a deadline? Do you need it by a specific time today?
I mean, ASAP is always appreciated, but
No problem. Thanks for the question. Anything else?
no, I think I'm good right now.
Okay, great. Thanks for being here. All right. Unless we have another media question, I think Laura's hand might just still be raised from earlier, but if there is an additional question, we can unmute Laura. I'm going to go ahead and look through our Q&A. Okay, yeah, it looks like it might have just been up from earlier. Okay. One attendee asks whether we assess the experience of people seeking public assistance through the Department of Children and Youth specifically. Jared, I believe that's beyond the scope of the questions that we used for this specific poll. So thanks for asking that. Another attendee would like to know whether a question was asked to parse out whether any of the parents were choosing to stay home with their children. I'll let you speak directly to that, Jarrett.
We didn't. We asked what the setup was in that first slide that you saw where we had the 5-point whatever the childcare situation was. Naturally, some of those folks would be in the choosing, but one of the things that we know from the open-ended question of what would having childcare allow you to do that you otherwise cannot do, the number of responses, and I think we have them counted somewhere, that say work more, go back to work, or find work or get a job. There were some answers of just having more time for to get stuff done around the house, or to run errands, that sort of thing, but a lot of responses. So there's some balance there between folks who want to go back, very much so, including the 61% of moms who are part-time or not working at all that answer that question, that they would go back to work if they could find high quality childcare. But there are some folks who just would prefer to stay home with their child or with their children.
Thanks, Jarrett. Jennifer, I know you had some comments in the Q&A via text. If you would like to unmute yourself, you can go ahead and ask your question live. Jennifer Foster.
Yes, I'm here. Hello, good
Okay.
morning,
Good
everyone.
morning. Thanks for being here.
I have two questions. Great data. I love data, but I wanted to ask you, have you looked at or collected any data showing parents that doesn't have a support system? I think that plays a part too, because a lot of the times in the Black community, they don't have that auntie, grandfather, sister, great aunt, which breaks it down for them and when they're trying to be in thriving mode instead of surviving mode. And next question, have you looked at a lot of times I'm hearing from a lot of parents when they change from government service to a career change towards finding a job, they lose everything. They lose medical, they lose uh, their vouchers, they lose anything that they was receiving from the government. Is there any kind of category created, or is there a data pocket that could say, okay, these are parents that once was on assistance, now there's time trying to get from assistance to a career, and these are the hurdles that they go through. Is any data collected on that? Sorry.
No, no apologies needed. Jared, I can mention briefly before we chat about how that question interacts with the poll results. We do have, I think, some questions that might get to some of what you're talking about, Jennifer, some responses in our Family Voices report that Troy mentioned earlier, where we had the opportunity for parents to describe, caregivers to describe what their household economic stability looks like in specific examples. And I think what you're getting at with parents coming off of the ability to access subsidy because their pay increases with access to work, um, we think that the advocacy we're doing to support an expansion of access to publicly funded child care benefits from the 145 to the 200% of the poverty level, we think would really help tackle that predicament. So that I can just share that from Groundwork's perspective. I don't know, Jared, if there's anything additionally from the poll that you'd like to mention as well.
Unfortunately, it's a great question, Jennifer. Unfortunately, we don't have either of those two data points. Oftentimes in these kinds of surveys, you have to make trade-offs, and we had, I think, like 70 or 75 questions, including the demographic questions. So I would have loved. There were some natural questions that I wanted to do as follow-ups on the what the setup was of the childcare setup for the parent oversample, but we were limited by just time constraints, and you get too long in a survey and folks start dropping off. So but I'm making a note of it for next time we do this survey next year, to see if we can add some questions, that go a little bit deeper into the setup.
Thanks, Jared. And thanks, Jennifer, for asking those questions. I'm going to move now to Molly Fender, who asks in the Q&A, I suspect that rural Ohioans are impacted disproportionately with lack of quality childcare and early education. Is there any support for this in the data findings?
I'll have to go back and look at, we have so many cross tabulated answers where we have by age group, we have by ethnicity, we have by geography, so urban, suburban, and rural. I do know, one of the there were some differences that on the surface I think make sense in the do you stay at home? Do you have family or friends help? Do you have a childcare center? Question. There were, I think, 34, 1/3 of rural parents, which was much higher than the urban or suburban number, that their child receives care from a family member, friend, or neighbor, perhaps implicating that there's just fewer and farther between options for potential childcare centers. But we can do a run and look at the differences by geography, by urban, suburban, and rural. That was one thing that stuck out to me as I was reviewing the data before this presentation.
Thanks, Jarrett. And I'll also just note, Troy mentioned our roadshow visits that we did around the state this summer, and that definitely came up in different ways in urban and rural communities. So definitely something that's on our radar. And we've published in the past a rural report specifically. And that's something that we're thinking through how we might dive into a little bit more here in this upcoming General Assembly as well. Jesse, I see you're back. If you wanted to come off mute, you should be able to now.
Yeah, another quick follow-up. There were a number of measures that had like gotten worse from February of 2023, whether that be people thinking it's less affordable or less accessible. Do you see that as perception, or is that reality that access has gotten worse since February of 2023 when you last did this poll?
I can't speak to the issues on the ground because I'm just, I'm in Virginia. I'm not familiar with what childcare centers are doing, whether they're closing or having staffing issues. But I think a pollster adage is that perception is reality. And so if they're feeling that to them, that's their reality. But in terms of whether there's been a decrease in access, that's a question better suited for Brittany.
Yeah, thanks, Jarrett. And we know for a fact, Jesse, that costs have gone up, and we hear from our folks in the provider space that their staffing challenges have increased in that time space. So I think that access is multifaceted, but we know that those are two primary factors in determining what is accessible to a family. So if costs are up and there are less employees available at the centers, that we know that impacts access, absolutely.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jesse. We have another question in the Q&A box. An attendee is wondering whether anything in the results came up specifically about staffing, and they reference poor pay for early child care professionals that undermines stable early care and education environments. I know this is something that Troy mentioned in his discussion of our policy and advocacy agenda. Jared, I don't know if there's something specific in the poll to workforce pay in the early childhood space, or if it was family respondents, so they wouldn't necessarily speak directly to that.
No, the only thing around staffing, and maybe that's something we can look at next year, but the only thing we asked around staffing was from what you know, are childcare centers in your local area having serious staffing shortages? And that one we found 63% said that yes, they're having serious staffing shortages, compared to 22% who said no, not having serious staffing shortages. So that was the only question that touched on staffing.
Thank you. I might be able to tackle this next one. Someone saw that Kentucky offers childcare to childcare workers. Is this something that could happen in Ohio? Yeah, this is a program referred to as categorical eligibility or scholarship programming, essentially, for childcare workers to have financial support to send their own children to childcare so that they're not costed out. That is definitely something that could happen in Ohio if our policymakers decided to support it. So feel free to reach out to our team if you'd like to talk about that more. I've collected some data. How many of the parents have support? Okay, I think this is Jennifer returning to the questions around the support system. I think we've already answered this question live. A question about deductions from income and determinant eligibility. Currently, there are no deductions used in the calculation with SNAP benefits. There are deductions for housing utility costs. I think that we'll work on this one offline, Christy. I don't think that the poll results will directly speak to this very specific benefits calculation question. So thanks for sharing your email address, and our team will have our contact information available as well. We can chat offline about that. Stephanie Butler asks, could the state offer employee incentives to offer on-site childcare? Yes, that is something the state could decide to do. There are a few different proposals right now in the General Assembly around public-private partnerships related to investments of childcare. One is referred to as the Child Care Credit Bill, which is a pilot program. And there are some additional public-private grant opportunities available right now in partnership with industry. Please feel free to reach out to us directly if you'd like to learn more about either of those. Okay, Jared, I think this one might be for you. Do you have data separated by mode of childcare, i.e. center-based versus a home-based childcare facility?
We do. Or if we don't have it in the crosstabs, we can do an extra run and look at the answers by the different modes.
Thank you. Do we believe that the position of elected officials in state government reflect those of constituents as represented by the poll results? Can we expect our elected officials to get to work on these issues? That's a great question. I think it varies widely based on the many elected officials we work with. And we'd love to encourage anybody on this call who would like to help us in our advocacy work to have those communications with our policymakers. And I'll share a couple opportunities here momentarily that are direct ways for you to do so. We have a question from Susan Tebben with Ohio Capital Journal. This is another media question. In terms of advocacy for an increase in state investment, would that include funding within the next state budget? I know you're talking a lot about increasing the poverty level eligibility, but for what specific issues would direct funding be best? I think the investment in changing the eligibility level based on the federal poverty level guidelines would have a specific funding corresponding amount corresponding to it. That would be an investment that our policymakers would need to commit to. And in our policy agenda, Susan, we've got, which I'm happy to email you, we have a whole bunch more specific recommendations around investments that could be made to better improve not just early learning, but early childhood health and wellness outcomes too. So we can go ahead and send that your way after this. Got just a couple more left, Jarrett, and then we'll transition to some of our advocacy opportunities. Thank you. A couple folks who we've covered. Some comments around access to staffing also increased by minimum wage. Thank you for your comments. And I think the rest of okay. Thanks for the insights. There are many organizations working on surveys, data. Is there a platform where all of these groups can come together? Keith, let's connect offline about how we can have central messaging across the early childhood system in our advocacy work. I think that's something that our team would love to chat more with you about. And a very specific question around reimbursement for gold level centers for PFCC families. Sean, I think that's another question we might want to get into offline just because we're close to the end here. I'll do one more final call if there are any more questions that we can ask of Jarrett while we have him in these last few moments. All right. Thank you so much, Jarrett. We really appreciate the partnership and your insights and expertise.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, and delighted to answer any follow-up questions that might come up later.
Thank you. I'll just tease our next webinar is February 11th. We're really excited to be sharing our newest data dashboard. Our last one was published in 2023. So we will be unveiling our results, our data at this webinar. And I think a lot of the content will speak directly to some of the Q&A that we had this morning. So save the date. And in addition to our February 11th webinar, we also have a great opportunity for anyone who's interested in pushing all these great data results that they found today with their policymakers. On Wednesday, March 12th, you can join us at the State House. Our team will be there all day. We are setting up meetings. Registration is open now at that QR code if you've got your phone out. And I believe our team is putting it in the chat as well. This is free to attend, and we will be matchmaking registrants with policymakers. So please include your home and work address in your registration if you can, and we'll do our best to hit as many policymakers as we can on this day. We'll also be hearing remarks from the administration and legislative folks, leaders. So great way to engage with your policymakers and network with one another. I wouldn't be me if I didn't plug our weekly morning meetings. If you haven't been yet, these are a really quick hit of information during the budget cycle. We know the governor's budget is coming out next week on Monday, so we anticipate having a lot more information coming about specifically the bill moving through the legislature. And it's a great way for you to network with your peers, learn in real time what's happening on the ground, and hear from practitioners and experts working in our space. Our next meeting, we're not having one this week because we're holding an event in Dayton with the Dayton Chamber of Commerce, but we'll be having a next morning meeting on February 6th, and we will have the Georgetown Center for Children and Families talking about their rural Medicaid data report that they just released last week. And very exciting news that our early childhood fellowship opened today. That is live today. So please, if you are interested, reach out, and Troy Hunter, who you heard from earlier, our managing director of policy, runs this program. We have a really wonderful, robust alumni network, and it's a great opportunity to engage with folks working in this space at a very deep level and get into the nitty-gritty of advocacy and communications work supporting young children. So please check out that website our colleagues put in the chat and get your application in. Thank you so much for attending today. If you enjoyed this presentation, we'd really encourage you to tag us at #Groundwork Ohio. You can share the materials we'll be putting out this afternoon. And please just follow our accounts for updated information. The media and everyone, yes, the copy of the poll with the, okay, I'll check on that for you, Jesse. Thanks, everybody. Please follow us on social media. And we hope that you have a wonderful morning. Take care.